Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so excited that everyone is here again with us tonight for our fifth part series of Digital Equity in Times of Crisis. Our webinar has been going on now for the entire month of June, and it has been such a wonderful, rich conversation every single week. Today, what our focus is where do we go from here? If you are live tweeting, we would like to remind you to tag DigEquityPLN and also use the hashtag ISTDEPLN as well. Also want to remind you we have a slow chat going on. If you just use that hashtag, and anything that you hear and you want to keep the conversation going, please reach out to us on social media and follow us on Twitter. I just want to remind everyone, if you want to engage with the chat, and I already see the chat going right now and everybody is having conversations there, keep those conversations going. Remember to use the chat drop down option to change it to all panelists and attendees when you want to post in the chat. We'll try to get to your questions and comments, and a lot of times we'll peep into the chat and see what everybody is saying, and we may even pull in some of the questions from there. I am one of your moderators tonight. I am Patricia Brown, and also joining me tonight and moderating this webinar is Carla Jefferson.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. Again, like Patricia said, we are so excited that you're here. Today on the panel, we have Valerie Lewis, and we'll actually just kind of give a quick wave as I share their names. Ken Shelton, Leah Crawford, and Michael Mills. And in addition, we also have Matt Highfield and Sarah Thomas who will help us moderate the chat. And then we'll also be working on the Twitter side, sharing tidbits of information that we share tonight. So we'll dive right into the questions. And so as each of our panelists respond to the first question, we're going to ask that they share a little bit more about themselves, who they are, what they do. And so let's just get started. So this question is actually for the panelists and our attendees tonight. I've read in a few places, like they say, right now we're, dealing with the pandemic. We're like really in a state of crisis. And so how are you may not be the best question to ask. So tonight I'm going to ask, what's been on your mind lately? And how are you coping with our current situations? And so we'll start with Michael.
Thanks, Carla. What's been on my mind lately is focusing on how, when we do move forward, how do we make what we do actionable, purposeful, and sustaining? That's been on my mind a lot. And I feel like this webinar tonight is going to help us move forward in that direction.
Tell us a little bit about yourself too, Michael.
Okay. Well, my name is Michael Mills. I'm a professor at the University of Central Arkansas. It's near Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm in teacher education, and so my job is to help the next generation of teachers go out there and change the status quo.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. We were actually just having a conversation about how can we help our future teacher leaders, how can we prepare them for, what they're about to step into. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. All right, next up, Valerie, what's on your mind lately and how are you coping with our current situations, since there's definitely more than one?
More than one, exactly. So I'm Valerie Lewis. I'm an assistant principal in the Metro Atlanta area, and I oversee special education teachers. And so what's on my mind is thinking ahead about what school will look like when we, resume, so to speak, whether that's a digital format or face-to-face, what that looks like. Are we jumping back into what we've done pre-COVID-19, or will we come back with more intentionality and purpose? And so my mind is swirling around more of our district leaders and board members that govern the body of teachers.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Leah, share with us who you are, what you do, and what's on your mind right now.
All right, my name is Leah Crawford, and I previously was teaching 3rd and 4th grade in St. Louis in Ladue school districts. But I am moving to an instructional coaching position. It's the first time we've had them in the district. And so when thinking about what's been on my mind has been our students returning after pandemic and after all that's been happening in our country with the killing of Black men and women. And I've had students contact me, pouring their hearts out about this is what they're going through, how much they miss school, but how much all of this happening in our world is affecting them. And where I'm supposed to help teachers teach and present equitable education. I'm so concerned about how that will look for our students returning once they come back, and how do we balance their social emotional needs and our teachers' social emotional needs with being able to teach and to learn.
Absolutely. That balance too between, making sure that students get what they need for curriculum and instruction, but then also balancing that with, let's really figure out what's going on with this child and not just making assumptions, oh, they're just trying to get out of work, like we have to really, and that's going to take a lot of work, because I think so many preconceived biases come with how we respond to children's actions. And, so, all right. And so the great Ken Shelton, if you'll close us out with this question. What's on your mind lately?
I'm not sure I understand.
That was your phone. There's a lot that's been on my mind lately. Ultimately, the panelists have pointed out a number of things that I hope that everyone who's in attendance here and who views this will understand, that we really, really have to have sustainable self-care strategies. We have to be able to utilize them on a consistent and regular basis. We also have to be mindful of the fact that all of the things that are troublesome or provide varying degrees of difficulty for us as adults to navigate, our kids are having to do it as well with less, what I would say, life experience. And, I'm just fearful that there's going to be this focus on, we got to get back to school, get back to learning, because we didn't learn anything and we lost all those months and we got to do it now. And I remember reading a technical article on trauma and learning, and basically a traumatized brain, or a brain that is going through a traumatic situation, is not going to learn anything because it goes into survival mode. So I hope that everyone on this call and that who views this, your default is to self-care. Sacrifice a day, a week, quite frankly, like real talk, a month of instruction if it means that you can have the conversations to help your students, your staff, any educational touch point you have, really kind of organize in their brains that here's how we can do things together. You do not have to do it alone. Here's the resources that are available for you. And yes, if it means taking a time out, if it means saying, I'm not going to grade papers for the next couple of days, or with the kids, if it means, look, you know what, we're just going to have a conversation for everyone to freely express how they feel, to be able to do it in a vocal or a written way, or whatever works for you, so that you can organize your thoughts and feelings in your head. That's what we're going to do. That, to me, is the very foundation of a strong social and emotional learning program. And then, of course, the other thing that's on my mind is the fact that you see so much in the way of performative allyship and virtual signaling going on right now, that I really, really hope that the movement around anti-racist and anti-bias support for us in education and us as a society, I hope that it's not a fad. So that's what I've been thinking of. And thank you.
All right, Patricia, how about you, girl? What's going on?
So much on my mind. I'm thinking about right now, like, what's next? Like, what else could happen? I'm like bracing myself for what else is going to happen in 2020. So I'm trying to not be that way, but I'm also thinking when I transition back to school and my children transition back to school, just thinking about those relationships that how I'm going to interact with certain folks and how I'm going to feel in an environment if there isn't, like you mentioned, Ken, isn't any change and things aren't different. So I think what's on my mind is just playing in my mind how I'm going to react to certain things, how I'm going to engage, just my self-care basically, and how I'm going to protect myself and my feelings as well, as my own children. So that's about where I'm at right now. So what about you, Carla? What's on your mind?
I think definitely in the same place, thinking about because I do feel an urgent need to make sure that we prepare students academically. Like, I mean, I can't get away from that. But I think the other part of it is the balance. And so for things that seem simple to many of us about the foundational importance of relationships, and that's how you get kids to, overcome some of the struggles that they're having, the balance between expectations and care, and knowing that we're not doing children a favor when we don't hold them accountable, but we're also causing more trauma and more stress when we just don't care about them as people and what they're feeling and what's going on. So like I think that balance, and then just to ensure that, I think Valerie mentioned it, like how can we make sure that, I mean, there are ways to provide instruction and support the students for curriculum and academics and include the social emotional part. Like it's not one or the other, all or none, just like, we talk about, it's not all tech or no tech. So I think for me, that's how do we help everybody to understand is that whatever we go back to, is not going to look anything like what it was when we left. And how do we adapt, to that? And so having conversations with administrators, because I work year round, school level and district level administrators, and saying like, teachers are saying, I'm ready to get back to my classroom and teach. But the way you taught before, you can't teach like that now. Like technology cannot be optional. And how we use technology cannot be optional either. So like for me, the fear is, and my coworker and I were talking about this today, what do our teachers need so that we can best support their anxiety level and their stress, but also give them the push and the support that they need so that we give our kids what they need on all fronts. So that's kind of where I am right now, a lot all over the place, thinking about every single demographic that we have and how do we meet those needs for those children and for those adults, So, all right, so we'll get to our next question. And so there have been a lot of conversations prior and during COVID, probably a lot more during COVID, about inequities. And I want you to kind of share some, like some names of some people who are the right people to hold accountable for these monologues, these dialogues that need to become actionable and actions with visible results. So like, who do we hold accountable for the inequities, and how do we help to get them to the point where we're actually like not talking about it? If they don't talk about it, be about it. How can we get them to be about it? And so we'll start that with Valerie, and then anyone else that wants to chime in after, feel free.
So it's definitely a loaded question. When we're talking about within the school system, that's going to be right with the board members, taking a look at what that board looks like. Are there inclusive voices represented on that board? And if they aren't, then that's where the questions on what's next happen. Some people may need to go ahead and give up their seat. you know, let's get some new ideas on board. We're talking about our district and our state representatives. We need to be having conversations with them. Those leaders of our nonprofit groups in the community. I mean, education can't function in a silo. And too many times we want to play within our own sandbox, and we don't want to invite anybody else to the table except for when it's during Teacher Appreciation Month. And then we want sponsorship and we want a handout. And that's when the partnerships make sense because, well, I won't even call it partnerships, the sponsorships make sense. So when we're talking about who we have conversations with, it needs to be somebody in every sector, from business, from politics, or school board. Those are the people that we need to call to the table, and then citizens of that community need to be able to back that up with the vote, and not just an educated or not just a guess at the ballots, but making an informed decision about people that have been doing the work and not just showing up months before voter registration time and want to put on all the paid commercials in, you know, underrepresented communities because now we want to buy votes. So we really need to empower ourselves as a people. We need to hold a lot of people accountable in and outside of the school system.
Absolutely, because we all play a part in that. And who else? Think Michael, Reggie?
Well, I want to agree completely with Valerie. Those people in and outside the school system, state legislators are the ones who write these checks. They're the ones who, well, let me take that back. They're the ones who cut how much funding that they write these checks for every year. And they're the ones, they are the direct conduit of where we get our funding or where we don't get our funding. And if you don't live in a place where you could easily speak to your state legislator, your mayor, we didn't have much change happen. We had some serious issues going on here in Little Rock, a rehash of what happened back in the 50s just this last year. And we didn't have real change until our mayor got involved. And the only reason our mayor got involved was, as Valerie, you were saying, he understands the needs of the community. He's our first elected Black mayor in the city of Little Rock ever. And he understood what the community needed, and he spoke up and he spoke out. And that's the only time that we were able to push back on the state board on a lot of issues.
Michael, completely agree with you and Valerie. I had wrote down when reviewing the questions, I was like, everybody holds a piece of this. One of the problems has been that we've put this off on children, and we've made the children the deficit in this. And the problem has actually laid within the adults around them. And we need from federal down to step up for all of our children. If we're looking at who has the greatest impact on children on a daily basis, we're looking at teachers. And that has always been the ground level at where kids are most affected, whether positive or negatively, right? It's their experiences, not with the mayor and not with government officials. This is with the teachers that they see on a daily basis. And teachers have to be ready to throw out that old thinking and the old pedagogy that we have. We know that it's affecting them everywhere from suspension rates when we're talking about our Black and brown children. We know about gifted ed, not getting into that and having to look at those systems again. And so we know those kind of, and getting into the AP courses, those big three, suspension, gifted, and AP. But if we don't catch kids, by the time they get into third grade, we're looking at 1 to 4 of our children not even graduating on time from high school. And so teachers have to be ready to throw out that, well, we've always done it this way kind of attitude and thought with teaching our kids coming back and getting rid of like leveled books, because you're already setting a lower standard for dealing with kids and be ready to scaffold. We're going to have to work. It's not going to be easy. We've got to put in the work to be able to really, 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 really teach our kids. And then at the same time, we need to hit the streets and hit the capitals and get our local governments and get our board members on there. We're thankful for Keisha Lee on Ladue School Board. She's a Black lady on Ladue School Board, and she is speaking loudly for our children and pointing fingers to say, look, we've been doing it like this and it's not worked, so we still need that. But we've also got to be able to make sure things are done for current students in the classroom with their teachers.
Absolutely. I do want to just piggyback just on that, Leah, and then we'll head on. Ken, unless Ken has something to add, we probably will switch over to our next question. But like, I think when you talk about teachers, because they are the front lines, then those building level administrators, and I firmly believe that our building level administrators are the ones that have the power to affect the most change, like, because they set the tone for that instructional platform in their classroom, in those buildings. They help to design, to look at their staff and design the professional development that is needed, whether it's content professional development or like functional behavior professional development. And it's them holding teachers accountable for the behavior, like it's them holding teachers accountable for the suspensions, who's recommended for gifted, who's recommended for AP, that really changes. So, even me at the district level, we've given a device to every child. We've rolled out initiatives, recommendations, but if that building leader does not see the benefit of it and does not hold teachers accountable for that, then the mayor can say it, the state superintendent of education can say it, the governor can say it, but at the end of the day, it's those building leaders that are going to really affect the change inside those buildings.
Yes, definitely. Wow. Holding people accountable, that's important. I think that's the theme that's rolling through here, like who is accountable. And there was not one person that everybody said. We all kind of said, I think I saw it in the chat, spread that accountability out for everyone. All right, so we're talking about suggesting changes in the name of students. Where does the student's voice fit into this discussion when we're talking about all of these things, inequities and things like that? How do we make sure our students have a voice? I'm going to start with Leah on this one. What are your thoughts on that?
So a lot of people right now want to hear from students, especially with everything that's been happening, and they've come to these epiphanies about what Black and Brown experiences have been in this country. And then they're like, oh, well, what's been happening at school? And we see a lot of those hashtags, Black at, my daughter goes to Mizzou, Black at Mizzou. And they're these experiences that Black students have had. And I think New York City is dealing with the Black at Padilla, the school system, private school system there. And so there's this hyper focus on the experiences that Black students are having. This is where my concern comes in. I don't want our children on display, their experiences and their stories, positive and negative, hurtful, and things that they have learned and grown from are theirs, and they are important to them and the people that they are. I want their stories. Students' voice can be very powerful if we get it from the spectrum of just expression, telling what happened to me, to the leadership part. And that's where I would want to see students' voice being used, so that they're not just going to a district diversity committee meeting, that they are actually put into positions and places where they are making change, they are seeing change happen. But this is the interesting that happens. when you have them at that leadership part, they become this circle of accountability that we've been talking about. They also then take on outcomes, because we know students will do better in school if they're engaged and engaged in the process of being educated, right? And so that's what my concern is with student voice. I think it needs to be there. When we see it working, it works tremendously. Children, we don't give them enough credit. I just think that as the adults in the rooms with them, we have to be very careful that we don't patronize them and we don't have them on display, that we take those experiences for real change to happen.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And you see it all the time when people put things on social media. They take their student voice and they put it out there, and it's to make it go viral and things like that. So yes, you definitely have to be careful with how you are utilizing your student voice. And I love the piece that you added with that whole leadership aspect, and then also holding our students accountable and giving them some accountability with that. Ken, I wanted to take it over to you and ask, what are your thoughts about the student voice piece?
So I'll tie it in with the previous question. I actually am a big believer in policy drives people, because you all had talked about, the school leaders, the building folks. Ultimately, we're talking a lot about changing hearts and minds. And I think that the time is up for that. Policy drives people. If you don't create the policy that forces the people to change, then the people won't change. That's why we keep having this conversation. That's why we keep seeing all of these things come up. That's why there are inequities that exist. And Leah actually talked about them. Which I bring this up a lot. So I graduated from high school in 1988. My entire 4 years of high school, I was the only Black male student in all of my AP and honors level classes for all 4 years. You still see that now. Policy drives people. And here in California, the state assembly is now retaking up a bill to reintroduce affirmative action in the University of California and the California State University system, because they tried the whole, well, let's get rid of it and let's continue to perpetuate the myth of meritocracy. And you see the disparity in those numbers. And to me, the whole idea around that, which I will get to the student agency part, which I'm a strong believer in, the whole idea around that is that I don't want to hear about an achievement gap until we start talking about an opportunity and access gap first. Okay, once you close that, once you look at, the whole idea around the defunding of different things, like, I just, you want to talk about using your voice, I just sent it to all my friends here that live in Los Angeles. There's a petition right now for the Los Angeles Unified School District to reduce their LA school police budget by 90%. And I'm going to throw a number out for you all. And by the way, it's public record. The Los Angeles Unified School District police chief base salary is $250,000. It's public. I'll put the link in the chat. Yeah, exactly. See, so again, why is that in place? Because of the policy that's in place. So when you think about the fact that every single school that I worked at, the nurse would come to school maybe once a week, but there was a minimum of 1, and in some cases 3 school police officers on campus daily. So you can say we need to defund that and we need to reallocate it here, but the part of the reason why I'm a big believer in policy is once that school board puts that on paper and puts that as district policy, guess what? Now the change has to occur. And then by the same token, I am seeing so much hypocrisy in educators right now around student agency. I'm a strong believer in student agency. I did a talk back in January in front of school leaders, and I literally challenged all of them with 2 questions. I said, first of all, how many of you are the first in your family to go to college? And a whole bunch of hands went up. And I said, and how many of you are a big believer in student agency? Bunch of hands went up. I said, so here's one for you. You want to talk about the difference between courageous and cowardice leadership? Those of you that are first in your family to go to college, you are in a position right now to dismantle the barriers that you had to overcome for all of the students in your district right now. And if you want to see how effective your policies are in your district, the very first students you should be interviewing are those that have flunked out or are now incarcerated, because they didn't fail. The system failed them. With that being said, I'm also seeing now, and there's 2 sides to social media. There's a good and there's a bad. The good side is I've now advised probably about 9 different student advocacy groups that they're done. They're done. They've written formal letters and they've written letters of demand to the school board saying, we're students in this district and this is what we want. We want all of our teachers to have to go through anti-racist training. We want all our teachers to have to go through anti-bias training. We don't want you, in fact, in one district, they even said, how is it that many of us have had AP US history and we are just now finding out about Juneteenth? What other lies are we being taught and what other information are we being denied access to? So for me, where the students tie in is there should be two things. There should be an advocacy group and they should have a seat at any table, because ultimately, if you think about it, every policy level decision that is made affects the students in some way, shape, or form. So it's almost like a degree of what I call educational disenfranchisement, that you're making decisions that affect the very individuals who have no say-so in the decisions that are made that affect them. So for me with this, yeah, the students should have a say in this. They should use their voice. And quite frankly, if the adults want to continue to deny them access, then I'm glad to see all the things I'm seeing on social media, all the petitions. And I even know in one school district that the students, so the policy is if you want to address the school board, you have to submit your name and you get 2 minutes. I told the teachers, advising the students, all of those students should submit their name. So all the commentary for that whole board meeting that's for the community is just the students.
Wow, that's powerful.
That's how I roll.
And
That's right.
They can't turn the kids away. You know, once the kids get up there, you can't turn them away. That's awesome. Valerie or Michael, any thoughts? Michael?
I would say, and I agree with Ken so much on that. What I see from my end is a lot of institutions will say, I want to hear from the kids. I want that student agency and what have you. But as soon as the students start speaking the truth, they get defensive, they push back. It's like, hold on, you know, you don't understand the complexities of the matter, right? And we can't have true inclusion, we can't have true equity unless we have true belonging. If those students don't feel like they belong to those speaking with a declarative voice, then they understand. They're not stupid. They understand what their role is at that point, right? What is it they say? The system's designed to do what it's supposed to do, and it's working just fine, right? And we need to turn that on its head. I love that idea. I was sitting there thinking about Ken's idea there. I'm gonna be speaking with the Central High Tigers pretty soon about that idea. I like that a lot.
Yes. It kind of reminded me of that viral video that's been going around with the district in Baton Rouge. That there, oh my gosh. I actually watched most of that board meeting because it was so interesting. But yeah, Valerie, anything you want to add to the conversation?
No, I think you guys definitely, hit the nail on the head with that student piece. They definitely need the training and the guidance of those adults. And so that's why it is important to make sure that we're having those partnerships with those organizations that are in the community doing the grassroots work, because they really empower that student voice and teach students how to be advocates. You guys have probably seen the petition from my district, particularly with the students pretty much calling out the school board, and their asks were very specific. Their ask actually came with deadlines that need to be met. And so now with that going national, the school board is scrambling because people are looking at these dates, and these kids have set dates as early as July before teachers show back up with this is what we want. And so, so all of that is important. And as you mentioned with that school board member, look, I don't remember the name of the lady. I don't know if her name was Connie or what, but it got hot in the kitchen and Connie was swishing her way up out of that room. I was like, look, tell Connie to sit down so she can listen. But, sometimes you just have to call it what it is. And he called their bluff, and he was unapologetic about it. And as much as they tried to shut him down, he was informed, he was educated, and he was right in everything that he did. And I thought that was so powerful, even for students and other members of the community to be able to see.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where that accountability piece comes from, just holding folks accountable. And that's what those citizens, the community, the students, even some of the other board members, we're talking specifically about that East Baton Rouge board meeting, they weren't having it. It was like, it took 75 years, and 2 years ago, we brought this to you all. We're bringing it back up again. Let's do something tonight. So definitely.
And Valerie, you bring up a good point about that parent knew what he was talking about. And administrators and educators and board members need to understand that for the most part, every parent wants the same thing for their kids. Like that's across the board. And I think oftentimes with our families who are part of the people of color, whether they're rural and it's a socioeconomic and they don't make much money, there's an assumption that somehow because they are a person of color or they're not socioeconomically advantaged, that somehow they don't want the best for their kids, and that they are in some way ignorant about how things work and operate. But the young man on the video, he told Connie to leave. He said if she didn't like it, she can leave. And so she went ahead and took her cue and got on out of there. And hopefully her letter of resignation showed up the next day. But I think that that's another thing that we have to understand, and that we are really trying to come to an understanding about within our own district, is that the stereotype about our parents of color and our parents who do not have the way, quote unquote, the same amount of money that other parents have, that they don't want the best for their kids, and that they won't be involved, and that they don't know or don't understand. Oftentimes, they are the ones that know the most and want the most for their kids because they're wanting something different. They want a different experience than what they had themselves. And so I absolutely agree with you, Valerie. It's a long road we're traveling, and we've got to give parents some credit here and bring them into the conversation on this.
I agree, absolutely. And I think too, like helping students and helping parents to be advocates for themselves, like we have a responsibility for that. I worked for 4 years as an administrator for special needs, and that's that was our focus for middle school students. Like for our, especially like even 6th grade, you need to advocate for yourself. You need to know like what rights you have, and then how to convey that in, a respectful manner. Because sometimes older teachers consider that as disrespect or whatever. But I'll never forget, and then we'll get into our next question. We taught students to look at their accommodations and to know, what to ask for. So I had a student to come down. He said, "Miss J, I've told Miss so-and-so that I am supposed to have preferential seating near the front, close to her. She's got me beside someone that I really don't get along with, and she won't move me." So I said, "Were you respectful? Were you ugly?" He says, "No, ma'am, I wasn't." So we go, and we talked to the teacher, and I said, he said he came to me, he came to you, he shared his concerns, and that you told him he would have to sit where you told him to sit. And I said, so we're clear that you understand that if something happens, there is no recourse for him because he asked you to follow the rules, and you didn't. And she says, "Well, he's supposed to be at the front. He's supposed to be at the front. He's supposed to be at the front." I don't have so much in front of the room, but if you have a student that is actively asking you politely to make an adjustment, you figure out how to make the adjustment without holding it accountable. And I think that's important, in some ways, and we have to help parents who struggle with conveying their thoughts and feelings in a way that it's when a baby is upset, they cry. We lose our language if we don't have a full language. We lose our language in our anger and our fear and our concern. So I still think we have a responsibility to help parents with that too. Okay, so Ms. Jackson, you can't come up to the school and cuss the principal out, but let's talk about, how we can word, I understand your frustration. Let's kind of make up a plan of how we can word this so that your feelings are conveyed adequately. So, all right. So our next question talks about how can we move people in power from silence to action and advocacy? So, many of us may have had conversations with other people, and they say, like, I understand that we have so much work to do, and I'm not where I need to be as far as like not using biases with students and parents and the community and stuff like that. But then there's no action behind it. Like, it's like we tell kids, if you like for bullying, like you cannot be a bystander. So how do we help move them from that silence of saying, I know it's wrong, but it really don't have anything to do with me, to that action and agency part? And how can we influence policymakers and stakeholders to be more inclusive and equitable? And so, Michael, we'll start this one off with you.
I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think it lies in making it cost something. This is going to be shocking, but it costs nothing for a white person to exist in the current system. Nothing. It costs everything to someone who is anti-racist in the current system. I think in many ways, and it's on the spectrum, right? Like, we are Walmart country, right? And the Waltons hold a lot of power in our state. So, in our education, we've had situations where we have school-focused advocate groups go in and boycott some Walmart. We just had some the other day where they shut down 3 Walmarts. They had to shut it down. That cost them at 3 stores their entire day's sales. That's straight out of Dr. King's playbook, right? But you also have the local problem, as I would call it. The local problem is, Ken alluded to this earlier, that performative allyship. I understand and I want to help, and I love all my children. I don't see color, and I yada 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 and all this, but they don't want to confront the problem. They know the problem exists, but they don't want to confront it because they're afraid that they're going to be highlighted in some way that's going to cause some kind of loss for them. And someone, I can't remember who said it, they said people don't fear change, they fear loss. And for many people who hold power in the current system, they feel like they're going to lose, like, I don't know, credibility or comfort or stability, whatever they're going to lose. But when you have someone who will not speak up in a faculty meeting, for example, when they know that there is a policy that is either racist or inequitable, and you're the only one speaking out against it, especially if you're a person of color, you get dismissed very quickly because, oh, you're just complaining about whatever and everything. And it's not till the people who hold the power speak up to get that policy changed. And I believe that we have to make it cost for people and have conversations with people, be open with these conversations, talk with them and tell them up front. And I've done this. At our next faculty meeting, I'm going to ask you about this, like for everybody. I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to, oh, no, I really don't want to. No, you should have not talked to me. If you don't believe that you're going to be part of the solution, then do not tell me that you see the problem and you don't want to be a part of the solution. Do not complain about it. Just sit there and revel in your status quo, and I will find someone else. But we have to bring this up. We all got to chip in here. It's got to cost us. We got plenty to pay from.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Michael. Anyone else want to add to that?
It's Michael, what you said about it has cost white people nothing to live in this system. It never really considered it from that point of view. But with the way the inequities are set up in this system, overall, it is economically irresponsible to keep continuing this way. It's going to cost you more for us as a country and society to take care of students who turn into adults who aren't productive or are not as productive as they could be and who aren't achieving in school, then there's not going to be something that they do later on as adults. It's costing us more to have this inequitable system than it does to have a system where we have a shot at this. Like, it just does. If you have well-educated people, they go on to be productive citizens, no matter what profession or job they choose or career they choose. So it's actually, when you just think about it from that standpoint, we're killing ourselves as a society economically by keeping things the way they are. But I think that a lot of white people keep things the way they are because they are so scared to be in the position that they have that the system has put everybody else in. It reminds me of, what's the little short lady that did the brown eye, blue eye? Jane. Like, she in one of her talks, she was like, okay, I need everybody white in here. Raise your hand if you want to be black. Come on, raise your hand if you want to be black. Nobody raised their hand. It's a desperate fear that they live in, but you let go of that fear. Like, why not want everybody to be successful? Why not want everybody to have a shot and an opportunity? We got the jobs. Like, we've got the jobs. We send out to other countries for those jobs in different markets and different professions. So just economically, it doesn't make sense that we would even stick this way. And so when we're looking at the people in power, it is board members and it's districts, but we're talking about those community stakeholders, those businesses. Michael, you talk about Walmart. I mean, it's literally, why do we need to boycott Walmart? Walmart, step up. It's more functional for you to have all of us having the money to come work at your store than us to boycott your store.
All right, just checking to see anyone else have anything that they want to share. Phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
All right, moving on to next question. Okay, so I will say that there has been a lot of conversation about at this point in time, with all that has happened, whether it be the pandemic, whether it be the racial tension that's been happening, but I hear a lot of people saying that they're reading books, they're listening to podcasts, they are having conversations, and that's good and well. And I know there was an article that kind of went around, and I know, Ken, you probably have it on the tip of your keyboard, about when Black people are in pain, white people have book clubs. So if you want to drop that in the chat, you can. But I'm wondering from the panel, just your thoughts after people have read their books, they've listened to their podcasts, they've watched their YouTube videos. Where do you go from here in a practical sense? And we can talk specifically about classroom teachers, specialists, and just thinking in general as we transition back into the new school year. Where do we go from here? After we've done with on the patio book clubs and in the park, social distancing, drinking wine while we discuss the book about how to be an anti-racist. What's next? I'm gonna start with Ken because I know he has a lot to say about that topic.
So I just put a link in the chat that, it's when Black people experience pain, white people join a book club. So, look, the bottom line with all this, first you got to break it down from the standpoint of why do a lot of those that want to be on the right side of history and want to be allies, why do they join a book club? Well, first of all, it's easy. That's the easy thing. I can say I read a book. The other part that I hope us as educators can do is to begin to dismantle and break the consistent cycle of any conversations being difficult or tough. To me, when you're talking about humanity, that shouldn't be difficult or tough, but it is necessary. And so, the other panelists have brought it up, in the context of having conversations in your classroom, When you become an abolitionist teacher, i.e. anti-racist and anti-bias teacher, you not only benefit as being a much more effective educator, whether you work directly with students or you are a leader in the building or a leader in the district, but you're also helping those students formulate terminology and understanding of nuance within the context of a conversation, so that when they become adults, those conversations are not difficult or tough, or, as Glenn Singleton has trademarked, courageous. So I think what happens next is the following. Everyone always wants to look externally for solutions. I'm going to go find a book and that's going to help. I'm going to go watch this YouTube video, or I'm going to go do this. Ultimately, what everyone, educators and even us as individuals, have to do is you have to hold a mirror up to yourself, and you have to ask yourself, what am I doing that's going to make me different when I'm on the other side? How am I going to be aware of how I am different? Who is going to hold me accountable for that? Who can I trust to hold me appropriately accountable, i.e. not inundate me with toxic positivity and platitudes, but hold me accountable that I trust? And see, the whole idea around accountability is that the intent of accountability is not to make someone feel bad, it's to make them aware of what they're doing. And so for me, what I'm hopeful of, and I mean, y'all know me well enough to know I won't be silent on this stuff. I haven't been, and I certainly won't be, is really demanding that educators do better. The bottom line is you need to do better, period. We've seen the data. The data has persisted and endured for generations. I share one example, and I could spend an entire webinar on all the things that existed when I was in school that still exist now. And to the point that Michael mentioned earlier, you think in terms of incarceration rates, you think in terms of discipline rates, you think in terms of accessibility rates, and all of those things. Ultimately, when people start to realize that, one, we need a critical mass with all this, and that's where I'm still watching. And in fact, I just got messages earlier where there are certain groups in education that unfortunately their voices are amplified more than they should be. They're already moving past the pro-Black movement and they're back into their usual normality of things. And so for me, it's like, look, we need to rally around each other. We need to make sure that the conversations don't change, and that we keep our foot on the gas pedal, because it is a marathon, not a sprint. And ultimately, we need to start drowning out those that are so desperate to grasp onto the status quo of things that they either can benefit from the status quo, or they have zero interest in being on the right side of history. So that's what I'm hopeful that everyone on here will go past the book clubs, past the books, past YouTube videos, and really do the internalized work necessary to do better and to be different.
Very well said. I don't know, Valerie, do you have anything to add from just even administrative perspective of what you see administrators doing and working together to do something different? Kind of what Ken was saying, like what are some actionable steps, practical ideas?
Definitely, and I believe Carla alluded to this earlier, where the building administrators do have an important work. And so when we're talking about that critical thinking piece with kids, critical thinking only comes when, I believe, you are looking at a particular topic through multiple lenses. When we're just teaching the surface standards, we come together in our PLCs and we determine what the power standards are, and then everyone just goes back and just does that, and there's no deep dive, there's no documents to support that. Critical thinking doesn't happen. And so me as an administrator, when I'm evaluating a teacher on the positive learning environment and the rigor of the academics that's being displayed, those are areas where now I can have conversations with teachers and say, what else could we have done to supplement what you did in the classroom? How could we have included, this student and that student in the back of the room that probably would have jumped in the conversation, but it just didn't even engage them. Yes, you did the teaching, but what we really need to focus on, where was the learning happening? What was student-centered? Where was the engagement? And so as an administrator, that's where I can kind of control the reins of that, so to speak, and hold teachers accountable to step your game up. Because if my son and my daughter is going to be in your classroom, guess what? I want you to come with your A game all day, every day. Because if you just want to do the surface level stuff, well, I can do that at home. I could have them homeschool. If I'm bringing them into your classroom, I want you to empower them. And that means that you are consistently learning. You're not just getting PD from us here in the building, but you are reaching further beyond your classroom walls. I was looking at something online today, social studies teachers, and they were talking about, I believe, the Civil War, and they were talking about some documentation, that some DBQ writing, that it was firsthand information that came from Mississippi and Georgia, and we were talking about the seceding of the states. And it was there in plain words, like, we pretty much want to keep slaves because they are an asset to our country. However, when I'm looking at the teachers in the classroom, that conversation never comes up. And so that's the fluff that I don't want anybody doing. You know, stop skimming around that. Let's bring the document, bring the documents. Isn't literacy supposed to be part of the curriculum? That is reading, that is writing, that is listening, that is speaking. I'm engaged at that point. And so why do we keep dancing around it? Is it because that teacher is uncomfortable? Is it because somebody doesn't want a parent to come? This is what education is supposed to be about. This is where we're supposed to have kids formulating their own opinion. This is where the healthy debate goes back and forth in the classroom. This is where kids don't just show up to do school. They are showing up because they feel like there is something of substance and value that they are getting out of it. So we can't just check off boxes because we want kids to show up on a daily attendance rate, but we really want them to show up because they feel like, man, I can't wait to get up in that classroom today because I don't know what that's it. That's what it's all about. And so the charge is on my shoulders and other administrators to be able to push teachers to that point. And, you know, just like Connie in that video, if it get too hot in the kitchen, then maybe this ain't your profession. Go ahead and push the button and transfer and let somebody else who knows how to light the flame come up in there. And that's okay. Sometimes we have to know when our time is up. And if you are stuck back into the whatever time zone that you're in, and that's where you want to remain, well, go ahead and jump into that time capsule and go sit there. But right now, when you're dealing with these new age kids, they want that. They want that. They are teaching themselves. So we've got to step our game up. We have to hold our teachers accountable. We have to hold parents accountable. Everybody's in this together. So I agree. Administrators hold it, but everybody's got to come with their A game at this point. It just cannot go back to being the same.
I was waiting on you to bring the fire, Valerie, because I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. Yes, for sure. Absolutely. And I love the fact that you're saying, you know, go beyond teaching those standards. And if that's the surface level teaching that you're doing, you are not reaching and touching, especially in this day and age when we go back into however we go back, you know, in the fall, or some of us aren't going back till January. I don't know. Whenever we go back and whenever we get back to normal, whatever that may be, it's got to look different for our students. We cannot go back to the way it was. We just absolutely cannot. So I appreciate you speaking towards that and saying that you're going to hold your teachers accountable and asking those tough questions and making sure that they are allowing their students to be critical thinkers. All right, Leah, anything you want to add to that?
Amen to Valerie. Preach on, preacher.
Definitely. Michael, anything? Good. Okay, awesome. This has just been, we're already out of time, but it's just been such a wonderful conversation. We always say we need to do a part 2 of whatever our topic is. But I just want to thank each one of our panelists tonight. You all are all dynamic, all had wonderful things to contribute tonight. Thank you, Valerie, Ken, Leah, and Michael. I also wanted to just put a plug in to look out in our ISTE community. If you are a member of ISTE, right now they have $75 membership, so go ahead and join. It's as cheap as it's ever been right now. Also, and it may not be that cheap again, I don't know. But definitely join our ISTE community. We have a thriving community. We are very active on Twitter. Thank you to Valerie and Matt, who are our they take care of our social media and push things out. We also have a slow chat going on right now. So even though we're out of time for this actual webinar, you can switch on over to your social media and continue the conversation and keep this going and make sure that we're going beyond the conversation. But as all of our panelists alluded to, we definitely need to have action a part of it. Carla, anything you want to sign out and say at the end?
No, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I thought, again, it was a phenomenal conversation. You know, Valerie always takes us to church right there at the end, which is what, you know, we need, because we all have a responsibility to do what's best for kids. And so, like, you know, Valerie was sharing the fluff part. The other part of that is, like, that rigor has got to meet the standard. If you know, like, if I'm talking about theme, then for 8th graders, and they've been talking about themes since kindergarten, if I'm going into these digital classrooms and these digital spaces, and I see my 8th grade English teacher using the 3 Little Pigs as an example, we have got to start having conversations on that. We have got to hold them accountable, like, for real, you know, like, so I think, you know, helping to support each other, but it's also administrators learning how to make that shift to this new digital space. And to be perfectly honest, now is the best time to be able to do it. You not having to sit in your office with kids with discipline problems because they, you know, they're not there. This is the perfect time to get a handle on getting a better understanding of where teachers are and using technology and how we can better support that. So thank you for everybody for coming, and stay tuned because we will continue to have these conversations. So just be on the lookout through our social media spaces and join us for the next time. So until next time, good night.